MacVoices is supported by iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Subscribe in iTunes or find out more at iChartMag.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk in the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's time again for another visit with Mr. Joe Kissell about another Take Control book, or an updated Take Control book. Joe, how you doing? It's good to see you.
I'm fine. You know, as I was telling you, Chuck, before we started, contrary to popular belief, I actually do have a life other than writing Take Control books. It's shocking but true.
I've heard rumors of that, yeah.
So I do quite a lot of this, but I do other things too, and I'm doing okay. I've had some challenges recently. Had 2 sick kids for a while, so that wasn't any fun. On the other hand, I also had a vacation to Disneyland, which was fun. So,
oh, that's good. That's
good things and bad things.
Well, hopefully they didn't overlap. That the sick kids didn't overlap with the Disneyland trip.
As a matter of fact, they did overlap.
Oh boy!
It would have been more fun if they hadn't been sick on the trip, but somehow we managed to pull it off anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that lessened the illness a little bit, or at least the symptoms. They kind of were distracted.
Yes. Now, for all I know, a few days after we left, Mickey and Minnie and Pluto and Goofy and Chip and Dale all started sniffling and sneezing, coughing. This is an occupational hazard. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I would think so. In that business, actually, it would be.
Yeah,
it would be. Well, Joe, you have to be just swamped right now trying to upgrade all of your books with the release of iOS 8, excuse me, and Yosemite. I can't say it, and you've got all the books to update.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this one is the first one out of the gate of this series of updates, or is that
right? Yeah. So, you know, I had the upgrading to Yosemite book, and I had the digital sharing book. And the digital sharing book did talk about some things that are new in iOS 8 and Yosemite. But of my previous titles, around a dozen of them are in need of updates. And, you know, this is just ridiculous. I can only type so fast, and I do have to write new books from time to time. I can't spend my whole life updating old books. But I literally have no idea how long it's going to take me to get through a dozen books, because some of them, like iCloud, required sweeping revisions. Some of them just require some little minor tweaks here and there, but you know, it's kind of a big deal to keep these all up to date. So yeah, of the books that need updates for iOS 8 and Yosemite, iCloud is the first, and it's first because the changes in iCloud are so big and have been the cause of so much confusion. And you really need to have kind of a grip on it to get the most out of iOS 8 and Yosemite. So we're starting there. The next one's already well underway, and we'll be talking about that real soon.
I'm glad that iCloud is first, because I think that's one of the biggest concerns or issues we've seen with Apple revamping iCloud. Creating, I guess it's creating or renaming or implementing iCloud Drive, which caused some problems with iOS 8 out of the gate. If you turned it on, you really fouled things up if you hadn't upgraded to Yosemite. In fact, I think you may have fouled things up even if you had upgraded to Yosemite. We're right back to that discussion, Joe. It seems like Apple, they try so hard, but they just don't completely get cloud. Do you think with this version of iCloud, they're getting it finally?
Look at the time. I've got to go. It puts me in an awkward situation because, you know, on the one hand, I wrote the book on this. And of course, I want people to use the product because I want people to buy my book. On the other hand, as a user, I just have a constant string of, seriously, Apple? Come on, really? I mean, this is my constant reaction. And I had this reaction with a number of things in iOS 8 and Yosemite. Some of those things have been worked out now, some of them haven't. I don't feel like Apple has gotten a grip on the cloud yet. To be fair, there are some parts of iCloud that work really, really well, that are reliable and have been largely reliable almost since day one. So I don't want to act as though iCloud is just some big mess. It's not. But I do feel like some of the changes just weren't thought through well enough. And you mentioned one, the transition to iCloud Drive. That's rough. It was rough at the beginning, and even now it's still. I mean, it puts people who don't have iOS 8 or Yosemite running on all their devices in a bind because you don't have to upgrade to iCloud Drive, but that means that all your newer devices won't be able to benefit from all of its features, which are many. On the other hand, but your old devices will be able to keep their documents in sync. On the other hand, the reverse is also true. You go ahead and upgrade. Now your new devices work great and your old ones are left out in the cold. So it's just, there had to be a better way, I have to believe. And I just keep running across things. As I was trying to write about iCloud, I'm like, this new feature doesn't seem to be working in the way I expected it to, and I do all these tests, and I start, doing searches on the web to see what other people's experience is, and they're also having weird problems, and I search on Apple's site, and Apple's help pages are all like, oh, to use iCloud Drive, you just click on this icon, you drag things in, you drag things out, done. I'm like, no. I know that's your theory about how it ought to work under optimal circumstances, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Explain the logic that you're using underneath. Explain why I see this here, but I don't see it there. Explain why this happens in these circumstances, but not these others. And Apple doesn't explain it. So, I did a lot of experiments, and I have tried to tease out Apple's logic as best I can. I can explain, so that you don't have to do these tests yourself. I can explain, now this is what's going to happen when you do this. I don't know why it happens, and I don't think it's a very good idea that it happens, but this is what happens. And so I'm not an Apple apologist. I can't say, oh no, iCloud is great. If it's not working correctly, it's just you. No, it's not you. It's Apple. It's totally Apple. But I do think there's an extent to which Apple just hasn't explained things very well. So, okay, I can help with that. And there is an extent to which it doesn't make it very good, and some changes will have to happen and probably will happen over time.
So again, the value, I think, of this book is, and all of your books, but especially this book, is you've kind of taken the hits for us. You maybe tell us where the landmines are planted. You also tell us, where the safe passages are and the things they're absolutely safe to use. I know I've had a little bit of inconsistency because on my production machine, I've not upgraded to Yosemite yet. I'm within about a week because I finally found a replacement for a piece of legacy software that no longer runs on Yosemite. But all my iOS devices have been updated. And I have found some things, notably third-party apps, not Apple apps, interestingly, the syncing breaking. So I'm kind of anxious to get everything back up on that single level and get it all evened out again. Are you saying that some of these problems that you're experiencing are they the Apple apps and the Apple services, or is it related to the third-party apps that you see the most problems?
Well, it's both. I mean, I've had the same kind of thing that you're describing. I had something where I had the same software installed on two different Macs, and it was working exactly correctly on one. It was not working on the other. And I'm like, I can't figure this out. It's the same software, the same versions. And then I remembered that this software used to support iCloud syncing, but in the new version, they dropped that feature because it just wasn't reliable enough, and they'd switched to Dropbox. And I had switched the syncing on one of my Macs, but not on the other. So the settings weren't communicating with each other. And once I figured that out, it started working fine. But I mean, that's not really exactly what you're describing. It's sort of a meta issue, but most of the problems I've encountered actually manifest themselves even with Apple's apps. I mean, I don't know how in depth you want to get, but since we've been talking about iCloud Drive, the way I expected it to work, based on the keynote where it was introduced and based on all the PR ahead of time, what I expected is that it would work just like Dropbox. So hey, I'm in whatever Pages on my iPhone, and I go to this file picker, and look, there's all of my folders and all of my documents from all of my different apps, the same thing I would see if I clicked the iCloud Drive in the Finder on my Mac. And I can just open anything, and I can edit it, and I save it. I don't even have to explicitly save it. It just saves automatically, and then it's just there in iCloud Drive, and another app can access it that seems, I mean, wouldn't that be the logical way everybody would expect it to work? And it kind of sort of works a little bit like that if you are using Pages in this example to edit a Pages document in the Pages folder. But if you decide you want to go into another apps folder or a folder you created, and maybe you have a Microsoft Word document there or a text document or something else that Pages can read, well, then it doesn't just edit it, it imports the document back. It actually makes a copy in Pages' own sandbox, and you can edit and save that copy, but then the original is untouched. That might be what you want, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And there are, I mean, that's one example out of dozens. There are all these little situations where if you do anything that's a little bit different from what the app is expecting, you're going to end up importing or exporting instead of opening or saving. Or things aren't going to sync properly, or you'll see a certain set of folders on your Mac, a different set of folders on your iPhone, a third set of folders if you go to iCloud.com and go to iCloud Drive there. And these sorts of inconsistencies and the mental effort, like, you're in Pages or whatever, and you're like, okay, I know there's a document that Pages is able to open. I know it's stored in iCloud Drive. How do I get it? It's not obvious. I can explain how to do it, and once you realize how to do it, you say, okay, that makes sense. But Apple could have made it obvious. Apple's great at making things obvious when they put their mind to it, but they didn't put their mind to it in this case. You have to go through highly unintuitive steps to get at your stuff, and it's just really irritating. It's really irritating that the interaction is not as smooth as it could be, and it shouldn't require a book, but it requires a book. And I could say the same thing about iCloud family sharing, and I could say the same thing about iCloud photo library. I mean, in theory, on paper, these are great features, and I'll bet that in 6 months or a year, once some of the bugs and kinks have been worked out and some apps have been updated and stuff, they'll be a lot better. But as of today, it's just, it's not obvious, and it's painful.
Okay, so I think I heard something in there that they work, and maybe I'm just saying the same thing you did. They work just fine, but they don't work as expected, and there's a difference there, because if they work and you can teach me how to understand the logic or the function, great. If we have another problem where they don't work, then that's a whole nother set of issues.
Well, it's it's semantics. There's working and then there's working. This is back to the whole, like, is it a bug or is it a feature discussion? So I can say, here's a series of steps you can go through to open a document from app A and app B. And yeah, you go through those steps and you do get that result. Now you go to a different app, you can't use those steps anymore. Those steps don't work. Is that because there's a bug? Is that because the second developer just didn't implement things the same way or the right way? Yes, maybe both, neither, I don't know. So I think that Apple has not enforced consistency in the user experience. And I regard that as not working. Personally, my take on it is, if I have to guess an experiment with every app that I use to get the desired result, it's not working. It's not a matter of just I have to memorize this different set of procedures for every app I use. That's not functional for me.
Okay. Before we dig into the book, there's one other question I wanted to ask you, because you said a minute ago, you sort of implied it, but we seem to have a lot of confusion over iCloud and iCloud Drive.
Oh my God! Oh,
so, okay. Calm down. So is one a subset of the other, or is it two different set of services that are under the same umbrella? Joe's having a stroke.
So I went. Oh, my picture just changed.
Yes.
Okay. So I went to a user group in Fresno last week to give a presentation on this stuff, on what's new in iCloud and iOS 8 and Yosemite. So I happened to start with iCloud Drive because that was an area of particular confusion, and so I did my darndest to explain iCloud Drive, and what it does and how it's different from what came before and all this kind of stuff. It took me like 15 minutes. It wasn't the way I intended it, but people kept asking me questions. So I'm like, okay, clearly we need more explanation here. So I did that. And then when I think I'm done, a woman raises her hand and she says, okay, thanks for that, but I'm still confused. Is iCloud Drive the same thing as iCloud? And I'm like, I'm trying not to like, I didn't, I don't want to say like, did you not listen to me for the past 15 minutes? Because clearly if you didn't understand that, then I failed as an explainer. So I'm like, okay, we'll start over again. And I said, okay. And I actually there was a whiteboard there. So I drew like, here's a picture of the cloud and here's like all the different features in iCloud. And I said, okay, iCloud and, a little box. And this is iCloud Drive. iCloud Drive is a feature of iCloud. It's not the only feature. It has mail and contacts and photos and blah, 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 keychains. But iCloud Drive is a feature. Now, in this spot that iCloud Drive is occupying, there used to be another feature called Documents in the Cloud. And when you upgrade, you swap out that feature and put this feature in its place. You can't use them both at the same time. You can use one or the other. They're both ways of syncing documents, but they are both aspects of iCloud. So I explained this, and then I got finished with that. And then another man raised his hand and was like, okay, thanks, but I'm a little bit unclear on whether iCloud and iCloud Drive are the same thing. And so at that point, I think I stopped feeling inadequate as an explainer, and I started feeling like Apple was inadequate as an explainer. That is, if Apple's presentation of these features, if their naming, if the way they expose them on screen and in their apps is this confusing, I can't really feel guilty about not making it crystal clear. I mean, the actual answer to your question is iCloud Drive is a subset, a single feature out of the many things that iCloud does, and it replaces documents in the cloud. That's the actual answer. But in fact, iCloud itself is a really hard thing to pin down. As I say in the book, it doesn't have much thingness. I mean, it's not software. It's not a website. It's not a product you can buy. It's just this sort of amorphous collection of features and APIs and these vague ephemeral things that kind of arbitrarily are given this label of iCloud. Well, so, when you buy something from iTunes and iTunes lets you re-download that later or on a different machine, that goes through the cloud and it uses your Apple ID, the same Apple ID used for iCloud. Well, is that an iCloud feature or not? Well, it's not really, but it's kind of, it's sort of ambiguous. And so I can't blame anyone for not kind of getting iCloud, because Apple has done a terrible job of explaining that this is what iCloud is, and these things are in iCloud, and this is what iCloud is not, and these things are outside of iCloud. So it's confusing, and I don't blame anybody for being confused. I'm doing my darndest, both in the book and in person, to sort out these things for you, but I can only work with what I got, and that's a little bit frustrating.
It's frustrating for all of us, but I think your explanation is good, and I think pointing out all the features that sort of come under that iCloud umbrella. iCloud Drive is one of them. Find My Mac is one of them, or Find My iPhone, or whatever.
You've just come up with a better name for this book. It shouldn't be Take Control of iCloud. It should be the iCloud umbrella, because the cloud is up there and something's coming out of it.
Well, I understand, because Apple wants to appear. Okay, I'm going to defend them for just a second. Okay, I think that they would like to have you feel that iCloud is the only cloud service you will ever need. You won't need Dropbox. You won't need any of the Office online options. You won't need any of the Google Drive options. Everything is right there under the iCloud umbrella. Yeah. Suddenly we've coined a phrase. So I get that part. I do think, though, that when you start talking about syncing through iCloud and the different services and features of iCloud, that's where we really need you to kind of straighten us out and not only explain what all those features are, but also the ones that aren't working. And then to take this back to an earlier part of the discussion, how they work, because they may not work as expected.
And you mentioned Dropbox. A lot of people, and I was one of them, had the idea, hoped that iCloud Drive would just replace Dropbox. It would do all the same things, and now I don't have to have my data in multiple cloud services. I can just have everything in iCloud. As it turns out, iCloud Drive and Dropbox have a few things in common, but they're really not. They're not in any way interchangeable. Dropbox does a lot of things that iCloud Drive doesn't, and vice versa. So you can't get away with just saying, well, I'm going to replace Dropbox with iCloud Drive. It just doesn't work like that. And, as things stand today, I still have to use Google Drive for some things, even if I don't want to. I still have to use, I have my online backup providers, but then I also have my cloud storage providers. And I wrote an article in Macworld a couple weeks ago about this. I used to have a dozen different cloud storage accounts, and it's crazy, but they're not just interchangeable. They all have different features, and how do you make sense of that and figure out exactly what you do need to use? So it's unfortunate in a way. I really wish that Apple had actually gone Dropbox one better, so that I could say I don't need to have both, but it isn't like that.
And I'm not sure having both is a bad thing necessarily. And you just said it. A lot of the cloud services have different features. So you have to figure out which ones are important. But most people, I think, are going to look to Apple first because they're living in an Apple ecosystem and they don't have time to sit and do all this research. So again, they have to turn to somebody like you and to say, here's how this works, and maybe there's a better option out there. MacVoices is supported by iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Ken Ray, the brains behind macOS Ken, brings you iChart Magazine, a digital-only publication distributed through Apple's newsstand, where he delivers more in-depth coverage on the Apple news we all crave. Published Monday through Friday, it's the perfect way to get more of Ken's views and analysis on what makes the Apple universe tick. Of course, Ken doesn't stop there. He also covers tech news in general, but with an eye on how it affects you and me as Apple users and enthusiasts. And that's the difference. The iChart Magazine difference. Ken was my guest on MacVoices 14198 to talk about iChart Magazine, along with macOS Ken, iChart Radio, Day 6, and what keeps him going. Ken is one of my favorite Apple news junkies because of his unique combination of analysis and wit. iChart Magazine is your way to get his most in-depth coverage of our favorite computer company and everything that affects them. iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Find out more and subscribe in iTunes and at iChartMag.com. Thanks to iChart Magazine for their support of MacVoices. It's only taken us about 20 minutes to get to the book. So how about if you walk us through some of the things we can expect to find there, how it's organized, and how you try to approach this massive problem or this massive issue so that it makes sense to us?
So I organize the book in units that I refer to as chapters. And they are ordered sequentially so that you can go from one chapter to the next. You can also use a find feature and jump from one chapter to another randomly. Sorry. So actually the first thing in the book is kind of a, let's say that you are a person who read an earlier edition of the book, or maybe not, but at least you were really familiar with iCloud. You were familiar with iCloud as of a few months ago. And now you are aware that there have been a lot of changes, and you just want to have a grip on what's new. What are the things that are different? In what ways are they different? And where in the book can I go to learn about the different things so I don't have to read, slog through the whole thing? So new chapter for people just coming back to the book, or just wanting to kind of, tell me what's new. and tell me how specifically where I can learn about the new stuff. So I talk about how to set up iCloud on all of your devices. That could be a Mac, an iOS device, a Windows PC, or an Apple TV. And I talk about each of the major sort of categories of features. So there's a very long chapter on the photo-related features. So that's My Photo Stream and iCloud Photo Sharing and iCloud Photo Library, which maybe we'll get to it or maybe not, but they also overlap in weird, unintuitive, and annoying ways. And I have a whole chapter on dealing with document sync. So iCloud Drive, which we talked about, and documents in the cloud, and in-app syncing for apps that support it. And I talk about, mail, contacts, calendars, iCloud Keychain, the whole long list of iCloud features. There is a new chapter, and of course I have a chapter on the website. The website includes basically complete versions of Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, basically complete version of Mail and Contacts and Calendars, Reminders. I'm not going to tell you how to use every single feature in every single web app. I sort of skim over those things because, it's basically like the iOS version or basically like the Mac version or whatever. But there's a new chapter toward the end on iCloud security and privacy. And as I was working on the outline for this book, I was a little bit stunned to realize that I had never had a chapter on that before. But this past year, and the last few months in particular, there have been so many things that have happened. There was, of course, the scandal of the celebrity, nude photos leaking out, and there have been some other high-profile events in which things connected to iCloud security caught the public's attention. So I felt that I needed to say some things about that. Somebody has to tell you. I've said this before kind of a number of times in a number of contexts, but I'm now saying it here again. If you have something that you want to make sure doesn't get into anybody else's hands, don't put it on the internet. Come on. Do you know how the internet works? What happens on the internet stays on the internet. So repeat until you believe. So, if you're going to be taking racy photos, then you need to turn off every photo syncing and sharing option that iCloud involves. And you also want to pay strict attention to your iCloud backups because your photos are going to be in those too. And I talk about, what your options are. And, there's this way that's a little faster and this way that's a little safer and this way it's a little more convenient. And you can choose, but if you are concerned about privacy and security, you need to be aware of what is happening to your data and what the risks are. Now, I feel that iCloud is useful enough and valuable enough that I don't want to turn it off altogether just because there is some minor risk that a sequence of events could happen in which some personal information would leak out. Oh my God, someone might get to see an unedited chapter of one of my new books. I don't want them to, but it's not like it's the end of the world. But I do want people to be aware of what information is going out and sort of what their options are. You can turn off some aspects of iCloud if you feel that they are too risky. You can choose to put things in iCloud Drive or not put things in iCloud Drive if it feels like a risk to you. Following up on my book on online privacy, my book on passwords, I just wanted to spell out what's happening. I do, of course, recommend that you choose an excellent password for iCloud. And I further recommend that you use the new two-factor authentication for your Apple ID. So the two-step verification, as they call it, it is a slight additional inconvenience, but it is way, way safer. So I talk about that because that's a new feature, and I talk about the new app-specific passwords, which come along with it because that's a new feature. And I talk about the new site that Apple created where if you're about to buy a used iOS device, You can check to make sure that it doesn't have activation lock enabled, so that you have a certain amount of protection against buying a stolen device. So those are a few of the things I talk about in the privacy and security chapter, but it did seem like an area that needed some discussion.
I think it's a great addition. I think it's an important addition because we're talking about, right now we've talked about function, but the security and privacy issue has to come up at some point, and it's better that it's there as a full chapter as opposed to an afterthought.
Right.
Should I even turn you loose on photos at all? Is that a good idea?
Well, photos. So
it may not be a good idea.
So the old feature was My Photo Stream, which was originally called Photo Stream. Somebody at Apple decided that it would be better if they put the word "my" in front of it, and that was a bad idea. But anyway, My Photo Stream. And My Photo Stream was interesting when it first came out, and the idea was that you snap a picture with your iPhone, and hey, there it is in iPhoto or Aperture. There it is on my iPad or whatever. And I import some pictures into iPhoto on my Mac from my digital camera from my SD card, and I look at my iPhone. Oh, look, there they are. So that's cool. That was a neat feature. But My Photo Stream came with all these weird limitations and gotchas, like it couldn't be used for videos. It could only be used for still photos. And you could only have a maximum of 1,000 photos in the stream at one time. And there was a 30-day limit on how long things could be in the stream. And there's just like this whole long list of exceptions and gotchas and whatever. So then Apple announces, well, we have this new thing. It's called iCloud Photo Library. And this is so much better than My Photo Stream, because now no more limit of 1,000 pictures, no more limit of 30 days, no more limit of pictures only. It works for videos. Now what you're going to have is your whole photo library. It could be tens of thousands of pictures. Your whole photo library is just going to automagically sync across all your devices. That's going to include, your albums and your metadata and all this kind of stuff. It's just, you no longer have to worry about syncing different stuff to different devices, because now you only have one central library. It's in the cloud, and it syncs down to all your devices. So the promise was that the way contacts work now, or email, where you have the master copy in the cloud and it syncs to all your devices, well, we'll have the same thing for photos. And that sounded great to me, because I'm really done with iPhoto. I mean, iPhoto just it's so clunky and so irritating and so badly in need of an update. And I have, all these Macs in the house, and they all have different versions of the iPhoto library. And it's been really, really challenging to try to keep them even approximately in sync. So I was really excited about this. Asterisk, little footnote, by the way, this only works with iOS devices until sometime in 2015. So now we have the Photos app on iOS, and that is, you can use that with iCloud Photo Library, and a new Photos web app on iCloud.com that will also show you the photos that you have taken with all of your iOS devices. Now, it is true, your iOS devices and the web will all stay beautifully in sync if you enable this feature on all of them. But your Mac and your PC are still limited to using PhotoStream. So PhotoStream still exists. You can still use it. In fact, that's your only option for automatic syncing with your Macs. And so all those other limitations still apply. Sometime next year, Apple will release Photos for the Mac. And the new Photos app will replace iPhoto, Aperture. It'll support iCloud Photo Library, so that at some hypothetical future date, if it works and if it works well, I will finally be able to realize this promise of one photo library that's synced everywhere. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope Apple delivers, and I hope it is great. I'm worried, frankly. I'm not incredibly optimistic that it will be great, but I hope. But today, you have a mess. Today, I still have trouble getting my photos to be correct amongst my Macs and between my iOS devices and my Macs. It's actually more complicated than it was before because now I have two things to manage. I have my photo stream still, and I have iCloud Photo Library. So, iCloud Photo Library also comes with a catch. It's better and more powerful than PhotoStream in almost every way, but the catch is that it counts against your storage quota. So almost everyone's going to have to buy more storage from Apple because it only comes with 5 gigabytes, and that's for iCloud Drive, that's for your photos, that's for mail, that's for everything. If you have more photos than that, and I might have like 80 gigabytes of photos, then you have to buy more storage from Apple. That's something you didn't have to do with my PhotoStream. So I hope that in a few months, when the rest of the pieces come together, I can say, oh, now this is so much better and it all just works. But I really wish Apple had waited until all those pieces were in place to release them all at the same time so that we didn't have to go through yet another awkward transition phase like we did with iCloud Drive and like we've had to do so many other times.
I'm with you. That's the only thing that bothers me about some of this is because I understand there needs to be transition times between things, but I do feel like at times the gun is being jumped a little bit. That if you could just wait, flip a switch, and then sort of deal with any confusion then. But now through this book, we're going to take some interim steps, which should help, and certainly will help as of now. But maybe in 6 months, maybe in 12 months, we're going to have another transition to go through. So I don't know. It's a great book. It's one that I need to go through, I think, page by page, just to sort of make sure I know what's going on at all levels of iCloud Drive, of iCloud, including iCloud Drive. See, I got it.
Yeah.
I was listening, Joe. And I think everybody needs to. I mean, I'm not sure this may or may not be the most essential book you've written this year, but I think it's right up there because iCloud Drive is something that we all want to use because, as you said right at the top of the show, there's so many things it does so well. Calendars, contacts. I mean, those seem to be, oh God, I shouldn't say it, bulletproof.
Yeah, well, I have to say, to praise Apple for a bit, one of the new things in iCloud that I am super happy with. I mean, it isn't perfect. I will say, of course, it's not perfect, but it really addressed a pain point for me is family sharing. So what this means is I can access all of the TV shows, movies, books, apps, whatever, that my wife has purchased from Apple. She can access all of mine. Our kids can access them on their iPads. The youngest one is still only using an iPad as, for teething, but it's good for that, Gorilla Glass and everything. The other thing about family sharing is that my kid can now have his own Apple ID, his own iCloud account, and instead of running to me with his iPad every time some in-app purchase thing pops up, Daddy, can I buy this thing? He can just tap a button on the iPad, and then my phone will beep, and my wife's phone will beep, and is it okay if your son buys this? And we can just say yes or no, and it just happens. So iCloud family sharing did solve a lot of problems for my family. It is now more convenient for us to manage our stuff. We don't have to, it's not that it wasn't possible to do before, it just required more steps and was more awkward. Now it's easier. I know, when my wife, who previously had some apps that I purchased on her iPad, gets an update notice, she no longer has to come to me to ask for my password. It just happens now. So that's cool. There are some weird things about family sharing, like apparently developers can opt out. So some apps seem to, for no logical reason at all, not permit sharing among family members, even if they were free. And I can't comprehend that at all. But it happens. So there are, there's some things like that. There are some rough edges, some things where content is not as easy to find as it could be. But really, those are quibbles. It's so much better. So I don't want to paint the picture that Apple is just doing everything wrong. In fact, they're doing a lot of really cool and useful things. I think it feels, like some things were released prematurely and could really use a while to mature.
Well, I guess we all have a tendency to do that. The things that work, they work, and you move on, and you deal with the things that don't. Yeah. Joe, do you consider family sharing part one of those iCloud features?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So it is. It's right there in the name. They even call it iCloud family sharing, not just family sharing. So you do have to have an actual iCloud account, and you have to be logged in with your iCloud account into iCloud on your devices to use it. Actually, family sharing has more features than what I just described, but it's one of those things where, like iCloud Keychain, it feels weird. Like, this is an odd series of steps that I have to go through. Once you go through the setup steps, it's just kind of okay. It's fine. But like, I had this experience where, if you have a child under 13 and you want to create an iCloud account for them, you can now. So I created 2 of them. And it's this multi-step process you go through. You choose a username, screen after screen after screen after screen after, you agree to this, you sign up for that, you read the terms of service, and then at the very end you say, okay, now go create the account. Then it says, oh, I'm sorry, that username you chose is not available. And that screen doesn't let you pick a new one. Now you have to back up 6 screens, put in a new guess, and it's not going to tell you there whether it's okay or not. Now you have to go forward 6 screens and click submit again, and then it'll tell you if this name is okay or not. So I that could have been a lot better.
Yeah, stuff in these worked on.
But once you go through it, you're done.
Right.
You've picked the username, and it's fine now.
Right. So pricing on the book. And as always, this is available as bundles with other things. But what's the page count and the price?
So the page count. The page count is a good question. Let's take a look here. It looks like it's about 176 pages, a healthy length, and it's $15. We of course have a special upgrade deal for people who had the previous edition. So if you did have the previous edition, you will have probably gotten an email from us already about how to upgrade at a reduced price. Or you can click the check for updates thing on the cover to find out. And if you are just buying it new, it's $15. But as you say, it's great to have a bundle with other books, and then you can save 30% or what have you. So I think it's well worth it. iCloud is free-ish, unless you buy extra storage or sign up for iTunes Match or whatever. But it doesn't include a manual. and so this is the manual.
Yeah, well, it's a good one. It's a good one, and in some ways it may be better because you've gone through and you haven't just been singing the party line. You've tested things out. You call a spade as to what works and what doesn't. And
oh yes, I'm very happy to point out what doesn't work.
That's why we love you, Joe. Well, I know you. I hope to have you back here soon, doing some other things. But until then, I think there's still a mountain of books for you to work on, unfortunately.
Definitely so.
And maybe another trip to Disney World?
I have to say I was really tempted by the, Southern California residents get a special deal on like an annual pass. And I was tempted. I didn't succumb, but I think we will definitely be back. It was not only was it my son's first time, it was Morgan's first time too. We'd been to Euro Disney in Paris, but she had never been to this. And of course I've been to all the Disney theme parks, but
you're a well-traveled man.
Yeah, well, yeah. I grew up like I'd go to Disney World in Florida and Epcot Center and like all those, but new experience for her, so it was pretty great.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And remember, if you want my poor kids to be able to go back and see Mickey Mouse again, you need to buy my books to finance that.
At least one copy, maybe more.
Yeah, as many as you can.
Serious question, Joe. Is it possible to gift a Take Control book?
Not conveniently. This has come up a number of times, and we have thought about it. We have talked about it. It's a problem because of the payment processing system that we use. It just isn't set up to do that. We'd like to be able to do that at some point in the future, but it's not something that we can just do a little bit of coding and turn it on. It's a more complicated problem than that. Now, if you buy a Take Control book, you can certainly, email somebody a PDF, and it's possible for them to sign up for their own Take Control account and register the book, in their name and so forth. I wish it were smoother, and maybe someday it will be, but it's sort of an infrastructure issue.
So you can still do it. And you can always share. So when your friends and family come over for the holidays, instead of sitting around the fire and telling stories, maybe hand them an iPad with Joe's book and let them start to work on it.
Yeah. Now, you can gift things through iBookstore, through Amazon. So that there are alternate paths if you want to give it a Take Control book as a gift.
Good. Joe, thank you. Well, thank you for all the efforts on Take Control of iCloud this edition, and we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. Please check our show notes. I'll have links to everything that Joe does, his bio, which contains lots of information, and, of course, all the books. Also, visit TakeControlBooks.com. That's where you'll find Take Control of iCloud, as well as a lot of other terrific titles by a lot of other terrific Take Control authors. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.